Hey Claire, welcome to this session. Amazing. Okay, cool. Let's start our session, guys. So welcome to this session brought to you by Code Labs Academy. In this session, we're going to talk about 3 of the most popular technologies of the front end. And not only popular, but they are like the most necessary skills to learn in order for you to start working in the front end field. So first, let me take a brief moment to introduce myself. My name is Mo, and I am a web development instructor here at Code Labs Academy and also web development bootcamp lead. And joining me today is Nabil. He's my co-host today, so he's going to take care of all your questions in the chat area, just in case I don't see the questions because I'm sharing my screen with you guys. So without any further ado, let's talk about what we're going to discover today. So first, let's start with introducing or going through how the internet works and how the web works also, and how HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and how all these technologies are integrated in the midst of all this, information transfer in the internet. And after that, we're going to see, we're going to briefly introduce HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and see some use cases. And also, we're going to wrap up this session by seeing a real life scenario of how to make using these 3 technologies, like how to use these 3 technologies in a meaningful way to create a user interactive web page. Cool. So for time to time, I'm going to check your messages here. Amazing. Okay, cool. I'm going to share with you guys first this pop-up that you see here is the featured action in this session. So basically, this is just a link for you to give your feedback and to share your opinion on this workshop today. And also, I'm going to share with you guys 3 poll questions. Basically, this will help us provide to you the best quality content online. Amazing. Done. Now you can see the polls. You can interact with us in the chat area here. And then there is this featured option that you can click here on this share your opinion, and this will take you to a form to share your feedback. Now you can do this now, or you can do this by the end of the session. It doesn't really matter. I just needed to take it out of the way right now. Cool. So first, let's start with how the internet works. So you can basically think of the internet as a simple wire, right? Now, this wire is actually buried in the ground, so you can't see it, but it might be fiber optics, it might be a copper wire, or it might be through your cell phone network. When 2 computers are actually connected to this wire, they can communicate with each other, right? So as you can see here, this is you can think of this laptop here as your own computer, your personal computer, and this one here is a server. Now, a server is a special kind of computers. It's not like your laptop or the one I'm using right now to speak with you and talk with you. So basically, our computers are connected to the internet through an internet service provider, while the server is directly connected to the internet. Let's go to the next slide. So basically, another thing to mention here is that every computer connected to the internet has its own Internet Protocol address, or IP address for short. So for this example, let's say that this is our IP address, and this is the IP address of some kind of server on the internet that we're trying to reach or communicate with. Yeah, so our computer is going to request something from the server. So let's do a real example here. Let's say you're browsing to you open up Google Chrome and you type in any address like google.com, YouTube, Facebook, doesn't matter really, but basically you're trying to communicate with another server. My computer, for example, can request a web page from this server. So when I type google.com, for example, I'm requesting a web page from Google's servers. And then naturally, Google servers are going to respond to me with that web page that I'm asking for. And now the way this works is actually by splitting the web page into smaller pieces. And these smaller pieces are called packets. So these packets will transfer through the internet, okay? Just like this, smaller pieces going through the internet. And they go from one server to another computer, like my client, for example. And just like Postman's work. They know where to send this web page or where to send these packets um, using the IP address of the requester, us in this example. So if we request any kind of information from the server knows the IP address of whoever is sending the request. So then the server can split up all those information into many smaller pieces. We call them packets. And then they send those packets to the same IP address, and then we receive this page. Now, here's a cool thing about this. So the goal of designing or developing any website really is basically to ensure that users can open this site and they can see the information in an easy to read and relevant format. And also, this can be a bit complicated right now because there's a lot of devices, right? You can browse internet through a laptop, a mobile device. You can browse internet through your PS4, for example, PS5. Basically, there's a lot of devices that you can do this requesting information and getting response from any servers with. So um, basically, this will require the designer or the developer to consider these factors when this site is getting developed. Okay, so you as a developer, if you're making any website, you want to make this website both responsive, okay, and also uh, the interaction must be meaningful and really useful. So you don't want to make it really hard for the user to, I don't know, if your website is basically an e-commerce website, you don't want to make it hard for the user to buy your products, right? So you want to make it really easy. So here is the product. Here is a big button to add the product to the cart. Okay, the user adds the product to the cart, then he will see immediately a notification or something popping up like their cart, and basically telling them, hey, are you ready to check out? So this is your work as a web developer. And you basically achieve that using the three skills or the three technologies we're going to talk about today. So first, let's start with HTML. What is really HTML? Now, HTML is basically it's a markup language that allows us to structure our web pages. Now, that's only the structure of the web page. So if you think of a web page, as a human being, for example, or a car, then HTML is the skeleton, right? So nothing you can really see from outside. Just like website, when you browse google.com, you're not really seeing this code. You're just seeing a Google logo, you're seeing a search box, you're seeing a nav bar. But basically, the structure of all these elements were created using HTML. So this is just an example HTML file with HTML code. As you can see here, it starts with a lot of elements. We have the HTML element, the head element, the title element. So this is the title for web tab, for example. And then we have the body element. This is where all the elements you want to show to the user are going to list it here. So we have an H1, for example. An H1 is a level 1 heading, okay? If you guys want to see the same code represented in the browser, then it will look something like this, right? So we have a first level heading in HTML. This was created using this line here, H1. So basically, this H1, this paragraph element will create a simple paragraph for the user. Okay, so this is the structure of your web page. You want a heading, you use H1 elements to H6 elements. So we have 6 levels of headings that you can use. If you need a paragraph, you will use this P element, short for paragraph. If you need some kind of list, there are 2 lists that you can use. We have unordered lists, okay, and ordered lists. So UL is short for unordered list. And these 3 list items are basically the list items you want to render on the screen. And last but not least, we have this input element, which is basically type button. So this is an input, right? Because the user is going to provide something, okay? So inputs are used to grab or collect this information from the user. And we don't have just type button. We have type text, we have type date, type email, type number. So basically, we have one type for each data type that you can allow the user to give or to provide as a request for your server. So let's say you are creating a sign-up page, right? Simple. Sign-up pages, they usually have like 4 inputs. Okay, you will need to pass your name, username, maybe a password in confirmation, and also an email address. Now you can add all sort of data inputs in a sign up page too. But remember, you want to make it easy for the user to sign up. So you only require the necessary information you need from him. So let's say the user is like typing his username, his email, and password. Now, he needs some kind of input, another type of input, to submit that form. Now, input with type buttons are these kind of inputs. So you use the type button as an input to to collect all these information from the form. So all the inputs from the form, you collect them in one go, and then hitting that button, the user is going to send to you all this information. And then on your server, now we go to backend development. On your server, you can grab these data. You can create a new user on your database. You can save the username, the email, the password for the user. And basically, now the user can have access to your website by logging in using the same credentials. So yeah, HTML is just the markup. It's just the skeleton if a web page was a human being, right? So this is the same representation of that markup. We have this heading, we have the paragraph, and we have the unordered list. As you can see, it looks like a bullet list here because this is the default behavior of HTML when you use unordered lists. Now, last but not least, we have the button, right? So this is the same input you created here. So input type button, we give it an ID. Now we're going to talk about IDs in just a second. And then you give it a value as an attribute. Now the value is the same text you see in the button. Nice. Now you might ask me, why do I need an ID for any type of element? Now you need IDs because sometimes you want to make an element do something or act, right? You want to give it a condition, you want to give it a behavior. Now we do that using JavaScript. So the third skill that we're going to talk about today. But before that, let's jump to CSS first, guys. So yeah, now what is CSS really? Why do we need CSS, right? So CSS is short for Cascading Style Sheet. CSS is a design language that you're going to use to make your web pages look nice, look presentable. On the other hand, HTML is just markup language. It's just used for formatting purposes, for structure purposes, for your web pages. So we use CSS to improve the appearance of a web page. We can include CSS styles just like this in a separate style sheet. So CSS code looks something like this. So we first need to select an element we want to style, okay? Now we're selecting this H1 here, okay? And then we apply a set of rules or CSS rules. Now rules can be different. To apply a different color to an element, you can use the color attribute or the color style rule, right? If you need to change the background color, you use this background color rule right here. So in our example here, just by adding these two simple style rules, we're changing the background color for both elements. So you can do a lot of things with CSS, not only just changing the color, but you can basically you can use CSS, for example, to add media queries, so you can make the same element appears differently depending on the screen size. This means what? This means that you can design one web page, okay, for both desktop and mobile. And you just use the same structure, the same markup, but you also introduce a media query that will change the style rules based on the device width. So let's say if the device width is lesser than 1,000 pixel, for example, then we're talking about tablet devices or maybe wider mobile devices. If we talk about lesser than 500 pixels, we're strictly talking about mobile phones from from the oldest iPhone 5S to the newest, Pixel 7 Pro, for example. After you create your markup, after you create your structure, you want to add stylings. So after the skeleton, there is the appearances of a human being. So we all share the same skeleton or maybe different skeletons, so we all share different structures, right? Just like websites. And we all also share different appearances. So we have the hair color, we have the eye color, we have skin color, different heights, different weights, etc. So in web pages, you manipulate, you change, you update these appearances of your web pages using CSS, right? Now, the fun part, guys. What is JavaScript? So JavaScript is a programming language. It was introduced in 1995. JavaScript, up until 2008, 2009, JavaScript was exclusively used in web browsers, right? So you can only execute and run JavaScript as a programming language in web browsers only. So using JavaScript, you can add actions, conditions, calculations, network requests, concurrent processes, and a wide variety of other types of instructions. And you can all program them using JavaScript in your web pages, okay? Now, there is one other important part of this whole wrapping up HTML, CSS, JavaScript together. This is, let's say, this is the important link between making your markup dynamic, or let's say this is what allows us to make markups or to make web pages dynamic. It's the document object model representation of the same markup. So we have something that's called the DOM, or document object model API. Now this allows us to access any element in our markup and modify it as you see fit. The DOM is basically just parsed HTML. What does parsed HTML really means? Now, if we go back a couple of slides, see this HTML code, okay? So it's the body of the page starts right here at this body element. And then all the other elements are basically just your page structure. So you have a heading, you have a paragraph, you have an unordered list. In other scenarios, maybe you have multiple images, maybe you have a catalog of images with buttons for each image, a price, a title, description, etc. Now, what if we can represent the same markup in a way that JavaScript as a programming language can use? So this is what the document object model API allows us to do. It will parse the HTML. So the body, it will get parsed. Basically, not just the body, but whole HTML document will get parsed. And by parsed, I mean it will actually convert the same markup into an object representation of the same page. So this will look something like this, guys. Imagine this is the whole document. Then instead of nesting elements, right, together, it will actually convert all the elements into a big object and then sub objects. So the bigger object is the full document, right? And then we have the root element, which is HTML. So if I go back to code, let me show you HTML, guys. So the first root is actually HTML. If I collapse this root, take a look. Everything is actually residing right under HTML. So everything inside your document is basically a subchild of the HTML element, right? So this is why it's called the root element. Okay, so there's a question from Claire. Concerning the HTML, why do you use the input tag for the button instead of directly the button tag? Now, I can give you a simple explanation of this, or maybe just use cases, different use cases. Let's say I want to make a button to make something appear, right? So I don't need to use input type buttons for that. I will just use directly an element with type button, just like this. Let's say this is navbar, and this is a button to toggle the sidebar. So there's no information to send to any server, right? There is just this button, and I want to program this button to do stuff, to act, to have a behavior. So when I click this button, as you can see, we see the sidebar menu collapsing from the left. Okay, when I click at it again, it will actually close it. So this is the best case scenario to use a button element. Now let me give you another example. Let's say you want to sign up just like the example we were talking about. When you want to sign up, you have a form. Let's see this in action, guys. Let's do sign up. Basically, just go to any website here. Okay, let's say we want to sign up here at Namecheap. Okay, so this is a form, right? And these are all type of inputs. If we inspect this element here, as you can see, this is an input element. Okay, it has a lot of other attributes. This can be really complicated and overwhelming if we try to dive in all these attributes, because some of them are basically attributes that developers add to make JavaScript interact with the same element. So for example, you might want to give an input a special data set. So when the user types something, you know what this input data set is. Or you might want to add some conditions based on the data set you add to each input. So these are all examples, but the most important part is that this is just a type input. Now, if you have a form like this, you want to have your submit button to be an input as well, just like this. So this form has a lot of inputs with different types. This is type text, this is type text, this is type email, and this is type text. But this one, the button, is type input. So yeah, I hope this answers your question. You use buttons with type inputs for forms when you want to submit some data. Awesome, amazing. And you use buttons. Yeah, you're welcome. That's my pleasure. You use buttons with simple elements just like this. Just like the one we're using. Take a look. Yeah, just like this one here. So this is the button we're using to toggle the sidebar, right? So do you see this sidebar, guys? So we can either use this kind of buttons, or we can use button like this, input, type button, or type submit, and we give it a value like click me please. Save, we go back here, refresh the page, okay, and then we see this here, click me please. So they are both buttons, but you get the point here. Awesome. So let's get back to JavaScript, guys. Okay, this is a question from Linda. I'm using VS Code as my editor. Okay, so it's Visual Studio Code. You can basically download this by typing just VS Code. And yeah, there's a lot of versions for VS Code. There's basically a version for each exploitation system. So yeah, you can go here and download VS Code. VS Code is amazing, guys. I really like VS Code because it actually provides a lot of really useful extensions. The community are great. You won't really go wrong with VS Code. Amazing. So yeah, using the DOM. Okay, so the DOM again is the same representation of the HTML document, but in an object. Okay, in object format. If you guys know a bit about programming, you know about objects as data types. So basically, instead of selecting, like, how can you really select an element using JavaScript? If you want to make this dynamic, right? This example, we want to make this button dynamic. So we need some way to select it, right? Using JavaScript, because only using JavaScript, we can make things dynamic. Now, there are a lot of types. There are a lot of ways to select elements, but one of the popular ways is either by getting that element by its ID. Okay, so that's why we're adding ID for the inputs, or we can use something like document.querySelectorAll. Right now, using query selector all, we can search for some elements by the name of their tag. So for list item, for example, the li, if we want to select all list items that exist in our web page, we can use something like document.querySelectorAll, and we add li as a string, as an argument here. And then this will return to us all the list items that we have. It will return to us an HTML node list, right? So it's not just a simple array, it's a node list. It's a list of HTML elements that you can interact with. Cool. So this is just some kind of code to select an element. But as you can see, it always starts with document. So document is like the main object in the document object model. And then you get access to methods and to properties inside that object to manipulate and to read all your HTML elements in that page. So this is just a simple method, get element by ID. It's pretty descriptive. When you use this method and you provide the ID as an argument here between the parentheses, you're basically using the JavaScript and the document object model to search through all the document object. Okay, so from document all the way to the last HTML elements, and you're searching the IDs, and then you find the ID you're looking for, and basically JavaScript will return to you that HTML element from that object. So the only way this can be possible is by using the document object model. I really prefer to show you guys this live, like show you guys this through code, but at least right now you have an overall idea of how things works together, like briefly. Okay, let me jump to, okay, before the questions, let me now go to VS Code, guys. So we talked about HTML. It's the markup, it's the structure, it's basically the skeleton of your web page. We talked about CSS. Using CSS, we can style the markup, we can add appearances, we can make our web page beautiful. Now, how can you make a web page beautiful? If you already have a structure, if you already have a lot of elements, okay, so basically your web page is going to be a lot of elements working together to make a structure of a page. In CSS, you can select each element and give it some style rules. Like for example, you can give it spacing, maybe at the top, maybe at the bottom, maybe at the left, maybe at the right, maybe at all directions at the same at the same time. You can change the font family. You can give it a margin, okay? You can give it a border. Maybe you can give it a border to the right, to the left, to the top, to the bottom. You can give it a background. You can change the height of an element. You can change the width of the element using this property here. You can add transitions, guys. So what is a transition really is? When you click this button here, you see this transition. We're basically moving an element from the left side to maybe 100 pixels right, but we're using a transition to do that. Let me show you. If we change this to be 0 seconds and refresh the page, as you can see, it goes 0.3 seconds, 300 milliseconds to open. Now to close this, it will close immediately. But if we change this to be 1 second and refresh the page, so the transition for the opening part is still 300 milliseconds, but to close, it will take 1 full second, right? Now we can change for both, we can change the transition for both open animation and close animation too. So I'm going to leave this at 0.3. So yeah, as you can see, you can basically select all the HTML elements that you have in your markup and give them some style rules. So in our markup here, we have the body element. Okay, this is what I'm going to focus on because the other part is really, it's important. It's still important. This is where you add your title. This is where you link JavaScript files. This is where you link style sheet, okay? And these are meta elements to add more meta information. Now we add all this information to the head element inside the HTML, okay? Now after the head element, we need to create the body element. And inside the body element, all the file structure, all the web page structure is going to be added here. So first, what about this link element here? This link element is used to link this style sheet, okay, that you see here with this index.html markup file. So basically, without this style sheet, HTML will not know the appearance of each element. So without linking the style sheet, HTML is not going to recognize the style rules. It's not going to, it's basically, it will not be aware of any style at all. But only if you link that style sheet, then you will get your appearances like this. Amazing. Now the same thing goes for JavaScript. If you have a script file, a JavaScript file that you want to, when you want to collapse a sidebar, You can't use HTML and CSS alone. Technically, you can use CSS for that, but for the case of this tutorial, let's only use JavaScript for anything dynamic. So if you want to add anything dynamic to your web page, you need to write JavaScript code. You write JavaScript code in a JavaScript file like this, right? So this is just a simple code, and this is the code responsible for collapsing and closing that sidebar. So after you type your code, if you don't link that code with your HTML file, HTML is not going to recognize any JavaScript code at all. So you need to link it. If you don't link your scripts, if you don't link your style sheet, your markup, your structure is getting detached, or vice versa. Your style sheet are getting detached from markup. Your script is getting detached from your markup if you don't link them. So always remember to link both your style sheet and scripts as well. So yeah, we have a simple div. Basically, div is just a container. The aside element is a semantic element. Semantic elements, they have meaning. They are not just simple elements. They have meaning, and actually search engine optimizations, um, like best practices in SEO, recommend that you always use semantic elements in your web pages. So if you have something on the side, like a sidebar, you use the aside element. If you have a footer, you use the footer element. If you have a header, you use the header element, and so on. If you know what is your main content, there is an element called main that you can use just like this, and then you add anything inside. Amazing. Amazing. Thanks a lot, Nabil, for supporting Lorna. Awesome. So let's get rid of this image here. Instead, let's try to see what's happening here. So we have a markup. We have a simple button with class toggle. We have an h1 for menu, and we have a nav element. So this is another semantic element, guys. We use nav whenever you're adding a structure for navigation. In our example, we have sidebar, so it's kind of navigation too. So the structure for that must be a nav element. Using nav or using div is the same thing for the developers, but it's not the same thing for search engines. Actually, search engines recommend that you use semantic elements so the crawlers can correctly identify your web page and index it in the search queries. Amazing. So the markup is simple. I would like to get rid of this link element so we can see the markup. Okay, so without any stylings, guys, the same markup looks something like this. This is the button. So this is the button element, right? This is the menu H1. This is what we can see here. And then this is the nav element with all the other elements nested inside. So if I inspect this, as you can see, it's a nav element. You can see it with background blue, and all the other elements are nested inside of it. Amazing. Now, what about this aside semantic element? It's basically a container for the whole sidebar. And then we have another div, another parent container with class container. So you can see class, and another class here. What are classes really? Classes are attributes that you can add to your markup elements, to your HTML elements, to basically give some style rules to that same class. So basically, you use classes to target elements. You can use many different. Excuse me, guys. Alarm again. You can use different attributes to target elements. Class is just an example. We can use an ID, for example, as an attribute. We can use the name of the element to target elements. If we go to the style sheet here, what you see here are all selectors. This one is a selector, the name of the element. Which element? It's the body element. This one is another selector, H1. It's the name of the element. Button, again, another name for an element. Now this one, dot close, is a class. So basically what we're saying here is aside, okay? And with a dot close. So there is an aside element. This is, if we omit the close, like this, we're just selecting the aside element, or we're targeting the aside element. Now, if we combine the name of the element with the name of the class, okay? And by the way, classes, to differentiate between classes, elements, and IDs, when you type a class, you add a dot before it. When you type an ID, you add a hash symbol before it, just like this. Those with an ID, we use the hash symbol. If it's the name of the element, we don't use any symbol at all. So for the nav, we're not using any symbol. For the aside, we're not using any symbol as well. So this is targeting the name of the element. Now this is targeting the same element, but only if it contains the class close, right? So the aside right now doesn't have any close clause, but if we link the style sheet one more time and go back to the browser and click here, as you can see, what happens is JavaScript is adding a class to aside. Do you see it here, guys? Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, I can't really zoom in here. Amazing. So I'm going to click again, and please notice how class is going to disappear using JavaScript. Now we don't have that class close. Now we do have class close. So basically, here we're targeting the aside element, but with the class named close. So if this condition, or if this targeting element is actually valid, only when it's valid, the left is going to be 0 for that element. The transition is going to be 0.3 seconds. There is another thing you can add, just to show it to you guys. We can add like opacity, for example, and make it like 0.5, okay? Save, refresh the page. So we don't have class aside here, okay? We don't have class close for aside. When we click here, we see class close, but now the opacity is 50%. So any rules you add here to this brackets or to this block of rules will only affect the aside element, but only if it contains the class close. On the other hand, when you use aside only, so the name of the element only, all these style rules are going to get applied to that element whether there's another class or not. So this is just a simple difference. Okay, so we know your markup, you know your stylings. What about JavaScript? What about adding features, adding interactions to your web page? Now we can do this using JavaScript. We talked about selecting and targeting elements before. That was possible using the DOM. So here we're using the DOM to add an event listener. What is an event listener? In JavaScript, because it's a programming language, you can basically listen for events in your web page. One of the events you can listen for is the click event, like here. One other event you can listen for is when the document object model content is loaded. What this means is once everything is loaded, so the HTML is loaded, the style sheet is loaded, and all your markup is loaded, then this event will fire, okay? So let me give you another example. If I do a console log, so this is me just trying to log or print something to the console when something happens. What I'm going to print here, I'm going to type content loaded, okay? I'm going to save, going here. Now take a look at the console. I'm going to refresh the page. Only when the content is loaded, I'm going to see this message, right? So it happens so quick, but trust me guys, only when the content is loaded, okay, on the screen, only then you see content loaded. So we know now that this event listener is actually working because it's firing when the content is loaded. And also we're seeing this here in the console. Now the other code is going to run as well. The example here is basically using document.query selector. So again, we're using the DOM to select an element from HTML. If you remember, guys, when you use a class, you need to add a dot before it when you select that element. So here, we're basically selecting an element with class toggle. What is the element with class toggle? This is the element with class toggle. Amazing. So we're selecting this element and we're assigning it to a variable, toggle. And now once again, we're using the same element to add an event listener to it. So we're adding another event listener to that button. The type of this event listener is a click event. So we're only listening for click events. Something is going to happen only when this event is fired. Now, the statements to execute when this event is fired are these two statements. The first one is clicked. So let's try this. I'm going to click at this right here in this button and see whether we see that text. So now we see clicked, and now we see clicked again. So this means that this is firing when the event happens. Now, another thing that happens too, another statement we're adding here is a statement to toggle some kind of class. If you take a look at the code, guys, it's pretty descriptive. We're calling the sidebar. What is the sidebar? The sidebar is a variable. This variable contains as a value the element with the name aside. So here we're selecting that element, aside element, this one, in case you forgot, guys. Okay, so this element is the parent container for all your sidebar, including the button, guys. So we select this element, we assign it to a variable, sidebar, and then we call this variable, okay? And then we have access to all the properties of that element. One of the properties or attributes is the class or the class list. So we can access the class list of each element. Let me give you another example. I can console log this, like sidebar dot class list. Saving here. So when I go back, I'm going to click at this button. So we fire the event, and then those statements will execute. Click here. So we can see the clicked text, right? And then the class, the sidebar is toggled, and then the last one is console log sidebar class list. Basically, this is the class list. Okay, it looks like an array, but it's not really an array. It's called DOM token list. It's a special kind of arrays. Now, you don't really need to worry about these, but basically, these special kind of arrays they have their own methods that you can use on them. One of them is the toggle method. So I can duplicate this and try to toggle some kind of class that doesn't even exist, right? So let's call this class CLA, or let's call this class Code Labs Academy, for example, right? I'm refreshing the page. I'm going to click on the button again. And now the class list that we're trying to outputting here, the sidebar.class list, this data, this variable, this array, whatever it is, we're trying to see it in the console. We're trying to render it out for us as developers to kind of review, debug, like take a look at what's happening in your website. So now you see that we have two classes, Close and Code Labs Academy. Code Labs Academy was added as a class, even though it doesn't really exist in the style sheet. You can see it here, guys. So if we go back to the style sheet, we don't have any Code Labs Academy class, but this is possible using JavaScript. So JavaScript doesn't really care whether you have that class created in style in your CSS or not, but it will actually add that class for you. So if you know what you're doing, you create a markup, you create your structure of your page, and then you style it. And then you use all the features of JavaScript to make your web page dynamic. One of these examples is creating a meaningful interaction to the user, like for example, a sidebar. Now for the desktop, you don't really need a sidebar, but let's imagine this is a mobile phone. Let's go to iPhone 12 Pro, for example. You want the same page to look something like this when it's being served on mobile. So if you have, we have 5 links on the navbar right here. The 5 links, if you want to really render them out here in the navbar, it will take a lot of space. It will not look beautiful. What you want to do is to just have a button here and then a logo on the other side, just like all the other websites are doing. So this is a meaningful interaction that you can create using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, guys. There's like unlimited options that you can do using the three technologies we're discussing today. So basically, to wrap up, HTML, like the most important technologies in the front end are three: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now you can talk about all the other frameworks people are using in front end field, but these frameworks are basically built on top of these three technologies. So if you talk about Bootstrap, for example, Bootstrap is actually created like it's made on top of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's a compilation of all three technologies to give you those components, those Bootstrap components. If you talk about React.js, for example, it's a JavaScript library. So it's a bunch of JavaScript code, like files and files and files of JavaScript code, to create some kind of framework for you as a developer to start creating your user interfaces easily, right? Um, yeah, basically you can rotate. This is a question from question from Humera. I hope I pronounced this right. How you convert those three, we call them pipes, those three pipes, to look horizontally. Let's go back to style sheet here. So that's the toggle. Yeah, this one. So this is a great question. Let's say we want to make this horizontal. So if I get rid of the class, let me get rid of the class, guys. Basically not the class, but the style rule that we have here. So if I get rid of this one here and go back to our document, refresh, as you can see, now the pipes are vertically aligned. Now, using CSS, you can add an attribute like transform. Now, a value that you can add to transform is the rotate function. We don't have just rotate, we have a lot of functions we can use. So if I use the auto completion in VS Code, you can see we have rotate 3D, we have scale. So if you want to scale it, maybe make it look 120% bigger, you can do that by just using this function. You can translate it, so you can move it either right or to the left or to the top, to the bottom, using the translate function. Yeah, basically these are a bunch of functions that you can use to transform your elements. So the rotate function here will actually rotate any element by X degrees, and you actually define those degrees here. So if I want 20 degrees, for example, I save, I go back here, and you can see it's rotated 20 degrees only. I hope this answers your question. Oh no, these classes? Do you mean these classes? These are not actually classes, these are selectors. So again, a selector can be, let me show you. Let's go to this H1, okay? So the H1 has one inner text, which is menu, okay? So before we, you're welcome here. Okay, the example in this talking about is aside dot close. So if we go back to style sheet, aside dot close. So the first part of any style rule is the selector. Okay. So let's keep this under the spotlight. So this is just a simple CSS style block, okay? It contains three things, main things. First is the selector. The selector is the text you see before the first curly brace. The second thing is the open and close curly braces. So it's a block. You kind of create a block, okay? You open and close curly brace, and then everything inside those curly braces are style rules. Style rules are basically just CSS attributes. Once you learn CSS, you will not really like memorize all the attributes that you can use, but there's a lot of documentations on the internet, so you only need to memorize the ones you need or the ones you frequently use, and for all the other attributes, you can just do your research whenever you need those attributes, right? So if you let's say you don't memorize how to rotate an element, but you're working in, like, you're developing a website and suddenly you want to rotate something, you can go to Google and just type something like, take a look, CSS. Let's say you forgot that the attribute is actually transform, so you type CSS rotate element, for example. Okay, so the first thing that comes up is from developer.mozilla.org, or MDN for short. This documentation is the best, guys. You can always use MDN. It's a really reliable source of documentation or information. So here you see the example, and you can basically interact with it. Okay, so it's just transform attribute, and this is the value I need to put. When I put 90 degrees, it will turn to the right 90 degrees. Excuse me, guys. And you can basically just read about it. But anyway, let's go back to the class name. Yeah. Basically, you can come up with the name yourself. And not only that, okay, now I understand your question. Let's say the contact us, we want to make this contact us look more appealing. You want to make it look like CTA. So the first thing I need to do as a developer is to figure out a way to target this element specifically. So first, how can I target this element? Should I target this element by its name? But I already see a lot of A elements, a lot of link elements, okay? So if I go and select the elements by the name, all the other elements that share the same name will change. So maybe I need an ID, or maybe I need a class. So if we go with the class, you type the attribute class, and then you provide your own naming for the class. Let's call this contact us, or you can call it contact us like this. Once you create the class or the ID, doesn't matter really, you go back to your style sheet, and then you need to target that class. So the first part is the name of the class. So since it's class, I need to use the dot syntax, okay? So contact us. And basically, this is just me telling CSS, hey, anything I add here as style rules, they must be applied only for this class and nothing more. So let's say we want to give this an underline, okay, for contact us. So to do the underline style, we need to use the text decoration attribute. And we have dashed, dotted, double, line through, none, overline, solid, underline. This is the one we need. So I'm going to use underline. Once I save this and go back to my browser, refresh the page, open this up, and as you can see, the contact us link is actually underlined now. I hope you can see this, guys. Yeah, so it's underlined. If I want to change the color, I can go inside color and maybe go with something orange. Okay, let's type orange. By the way, if you use VS Code, you have this cool color picker that you can use. And basically, I want something that looks like this. Save this, go back, and the color has changed. Amazing. So yeah, basically you can choose whatever name you want for the class. Do you have any questions so far, guys? I hope this was clear. Like at least, like if you guys know now, if you guys have an overall idea of how to use all the three technologies, or how these technologies are actually used in the front end part, that's going to be a huge win for us today. Amazing. Thanks a lot, Linda. Okay, so before I wrap up this session, guys, one more thing I need to mention here. Okay, I sent out the polls for you guys to answer. You probably all added your inputs there. If you guys are interested in joining, if you're interested in learning web development in a really concise, straightforward way, plus a lot of coaching from real developers, like real life coaching, I highly recommend you guys to check Code Labs Academy. This is our website. So this is the website of the company that provides all these free workshops. First, before I talk about the workshops, let me just talk briefly about the courses. We have a lot of courses, guys. Whether you're interested in cybersecurity, data science, UX UI design, web development, or whether you're just looking for a front end course. So we have this front end engineer core course. This will take you from zero to hero in front end development, guys. You will learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React.js, and also some introduction about Node.js. Basically, this will allows you to create many projects with each technology, and not only that, but also with front-end frameworks as well, like React.js. React.js was created by Facebook. It's one of the most popular front-end web development framework, guys. I highly recommend that you check that out, even if you're not interested. Like it's really super handy to work with and also easy to learn somehow. Cool. So if you need more information, like for the web development program, you can go here, or let me just show it to you guys. So the curriculum of the web development program provided by Code Labs Academy looks something like this. We have 5 units, guys. Okay, so for the formats, we do have different formats. It can be full-time, it can be part-time, it can be fully remote, it can be on campus. If you're interested in learning in Berlin, we do have a Berlin campus that you can go to, guys, and start learning straight away. So unit 1 is just the prep section. This is where you learn, like really learn about how networks work, how websites work, everything about networking. And then you jump to Git. Git is what developers are using to manage the project history. It's super important topic, guys, because if you don't manage the history of your project, and by the history, I mean like tracking each change in your code, whether it's a line of code or one character in your whole code base, you will get an automatic way to track the changes. So that's what we try to learn to teach you guys in the first unit. Next, we will jump to HTML, CSS, JavaScript. This is where you will learn all the fundamental concepts about these technologies, guys. We jump to Node.js next. Node.js is a runtime. If you guys remember in the start of this session, I told you guys that up until 2008 and 2009, okay, somewhere in between, JavaScript was only used in the browser. Now in 2009, people some awesome developers created Node.js for us, and it's a runtime for JavaScript, so you can execute the same JavaScript code in any machine, guys, including mobile phones. So basically, this will allow you to migrate your JavaScript skills to not only create websites or web development related work, but also create mobile apps, create desktop apps, or basically create backend servers, okay, like real servers using JavaScript. So this is what allows people to be full stack developers. They need to learn 3-4 technologies, and basically they can work on all domains using the same technologies. Next, we jump to React.js. React.js is a super popular front-end framework, guys. Facebook is created using React.js. Instagram is using React.js. A lot of super famous companies are using React.js, including Netflix, guys. So React.js is the framework that you must learn in order for you to get a job in the tech field, and also to be like the best developer you can be, because it's super straightforward. Once you learn it, once you learn the fundamentals, you can really scale your like small prototype application and make it look like something like Netflix with all the features that Netflix has. Like, for example, this is just a simple feature that you can create using React.js in heartbeat if you compare it to the old way of using JavaScript, guys. When you go to Netflix and you like hover over any movie poster, immediately Netflix will open a pop-up for you, and it will just give you a full brief of the movie or the series with the trailer like automatically going, like starting start playing for you, the sound, everything look amazing. In React.js, you can do that like really easily. That's why I really love React.js. And the last unit, guys, is where you really put the work and time to learn full stack development. So this is where you create a server. This is where you link your server with your front end application. And this is where you're basically, this is where you will feel comfortable creating any website, or also joining any team of developers as a full stack developer. So I hope yeah, I hope this is really, really interesting for you guys. And if you're interested in what are the next steps, like if you're really looking to get into the field and just wondering what are the steps that we to join us, guys. Okay, we have the best onboarding process, to be honest, guys. So the first step is just what is the format that you're looking for? Full-time, part-time, whatever you're looking for, guys. That's what you need to decide. The second thing is whether you want to study fully remotely or on campus. Now, the third step is the step everyone loves. This is where you get all the financing options that you can adopt with CLA. One of these financing options is basically, if I remember correctly, having 36 installments payment. So instead of paying one, how do they call it? Instead of like paying the full price once, like immediately straight away, you basically get a 36 installments of the same price. So if you divide the price that you see on our website to 36 installments, it's going to be like a tiny fraction price that you're going to pay for your learning journey. So for the next course, for web development, for example, okay, if you're interested in applying for web development bootcamp, or like if you're just inquiring for information, or you just need to know what are the financing options, whether it's the right choice for you or not, I highly recommend, guys, you go here to apply now, type your name, email, your phone number, choose the course, go to web development, for example, and once you send your application to us, we will immediately reach out to you with a set of dates to actually get you to talk with one of our managers. So the manager will basically take a bit of your time, maybe 15, 20 minutes to get to know you and answer all your questions. If you're interested, guys, I highly recommend you go this way, because this is the best way for you to find out whether it's the correct way, the right way for you or not. You will meet the manager. They will answer all your questions. They will give you all the information that you need, a list of financing options, a list if there's any discounts, they will let you know. Yeah, basically, if you need like all your questions answered, just go there, apply, and we will reach out to you as soon as possible. The Berlin campus is the only one you can join in the next few months. Yeah. Do you have any other question, Lorna? You're welcome, Mary. Our pleasure. Thanks a lot. Amazing. So please, guys, don't forget, if you can take a moment to share your feedback with us about like your opinion on this session, please do so using this pop-up that you see here. Amazing. Thanks a lot, Marie. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Claire. Our pleasure. I hope I see you next time. Oh, by the way, guys, before you go, please, CLA is actually providing more than one free workshop per month. So if you're interested in like joining another workshop, maybe you will even get the chance to learn for free. You can just check our workshops, like the next workshops, and you can get free ticket right away. Take a look for all the free workshops. Okay, so this is the one we're doing right now, right? 3 technologies of the front end. There's one introducing the bash shell scripting. So this is actually the first step for you. Like you will learn the terminal, you will learn all the CMD commands. I highly recommend that you check that out. There's an introduction to SQL. So this is the query language used in databases. Free workshop again. Anyway, all the workshops are free, provided by Codelabs Academy. They can be found here in workshops, Codelabs Academy/workshops, and you can get your free tickets immediately, guys. So I highly recommend that you check out the workshops. So I can see you again. So I can see you next time. Amazing, everyone. Thanks a lot for being here. I hope I see you next time, and I hope this session was really informative for you. The video recording is going to be found in YouTube. And let me know if you have any questions or else enjoy the rest of the evening, and I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks a lot for being here with us today. See you next time, Francisco. Bye-bye, everyone.